Anna doled out coffees and teas, croissants and muffins, and watched with satisfaction as the early birds sat at their tables or headed out the jingling door, the flavors of joy or peace, amusement or bliss tingling on their tongues. Anna had been baking emotions into her pastries since her mother had taught her how to cook. Always the positive ones, to let someone taste sunshine on a rainy day, or to help another find solace from their grueling job. To help people find compassion in heartbreak or absolution from haunting guilt or internalized shame. Happiness tasted like all kinds of things: bright lemon or soothing mint, spicy chai or velvety chocolate. Whenever Anna had baked with her darkest emotions, rage or pain or grief, her pastries tasted like bitter licorice or acrid pepper, the kind of flavor that dug deep into your palate that wouldn't let go, that had you trying to drown the sensation at the end of a bottle or numb it in a cloud of smoke. Anna doled out warmed pastries and steaming drinks as the sun rose, nodding and chatting with her usuals, offering a shy smile to the newcomers. They always found her, somehow, the ones that really needed to. The almost father with grief haunting his dark eyes, his wife recovering from a miscarriage. The older person with a battered dog tag around their neck, ancient scars crisscrossing their face. The young woman that had had a port in her chest, tubes sticking out from her t-shirt, her bruised, tired eyes aged beyond her years. That one had really killed her. There'd been victims of heartbreak and abuse, people running to or from something or someone, people who had no one to talk to, people who were all but invisible. They all found their way to Anna's tea shop.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds. I am the editor-in-chief of For Page and Screen magazine. I'm here today with Makena Metz, author of two works that we had the privilege of publishing, The Tea Shop, which is a short story, and Eclipse, which was a short screenplay. Thank you, Makena, for being here today.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy I get to come and talk about my work.
We're so glad to have you, especially you're the first person who we've published twice, and
Oh, wow.
I absolutely adore that it's in two different mediums. As someone who writes prose and who writes scripts, screenplays, all of it, I love meeting other writers who like to dabble across the different things. So I'm super excited.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's really difficult being a multidisciplinary artist. And so whenever I meet other writers who are doing that, I'm like, yeah, like, don't let people box you in. Yeah, you got this.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind, just to start, tell us a little bit, without giving away endings, tell us a little bit about the two stories, The Tea Shop and Eclipse.
Sure thing. The Tea Shop is a magical realism short story about a witch who is running a bakery who has a chronic illness and meets someone who needs help. And they have kind of a conversation about illness in various ways and forms and trauma, and there's kind of a magical solution. It's a story that I think is really close to my heart because I have friends that were going through mental illness issues, and then I myself have gone through being a chronic illness and a cancer survivor. And so I wanted to write a story that kind of illuminated how those issues cross each other, and how we find support in each other too.
Absolutely. I love that. Love that so much.
Yeah. And then for Eclipse, it's funny. I actually started writing that screenplay because there was a comic anthology I wanted to submit to, and they had a theme for it, and so I wrote for that theme, and they did not accept it. And then when I was looking for submissions, and I saw that Page and Screen had this submission, and I went, oh, that actually fits really well for them. And it just really shows you that like one lit max trash is another's treasure. um so I really appreciated that, like, the story I wrote to be read, like, it got out there and got published. And I wrote that one, also a magical realism kind of leaning fantasy piece, about a girl who's getting treatment for her chronic illness, and is kind of exploring the changes the treatment is making and wreaking on her body. through the lens of fantasy and kind of has to come to terms with what this life-saving procedure has been doing for herself. And that one is actually autobiographical. So that was cool to write that.
Yeah, that's so great. I also love reading that screenplay. So you already mentioned a little bit about what inspired both of those pieces, but do you often draw from personal experience or like your friends and the people around you when you're writing?
I would say yeah, because and I think write what you know is kind of like becoming a cliche. So I'm not gonna say write what I know. I'm gonna say write what inspires you. And luckily for me, that just happens to be a lot of the things that have happened to me. And unfortunately, when you have trauma in your life and you're trying to process it and you're going, I have all of these ideas about how to include this or help other people through this kind of thing. It kind of helps give direction to a story because you're like, oh, well, I don't really know a lot about writing, a character on a quest, but maybe the reasons they're on a quest, I do know those reasons. And I know their backstory and I know how their issues have gotten them to the place that they're in, that they need to go on this quest to figure out who they are. And so I think like at the end of the day, there is a little bit of my life or my friends or like my experiences in every piece that I write, but they manifest in like very wildly and weirdly different ways. And no two pieces that I write are exactly alike in that regard. And I just think that's a good thing. And, that just means at least I'm not repeating like the same event over and over and like using writing as therapy, which is like a good thing too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, a slight follow-up question. Do you often write in like magical realism or fantasy? Are you drawn to genre?
I am, and I actually say I am a genre writer. I pretty much only write sci-fi, fantasy, and magical realism. And I really love writing in speculative fiction because I think there's a freedom that happens in genre fiction that doesn't necessarily happen in like literary fiction or in fiction set in the real world. And I really like the intersection of building a world and having those characters that you've created inhabit it. And it's really hard to do that in a non-speculative way. And I mean, so, you see this in like horror, like you're building this like world of serial killers and whatever, if you're reading like gothic horror, slasher horror. But it's a little, I don't know, it's not my cup of tea. And so I know what my tea is and I like it and I'm just going to keep drinking it.
I love that. I also really love the two things, your two responses in tandem, because I feel like a lot of people, when they hear genre fiction, they think of quests and epic journeys and these big magical systems and big worlds. But the idea of not knowing the quest, but knowing what it's like to live experiences is fantastic because you can have all of those fantastical elements and still keep the soul of the story human. And I mean,
Yeah.
I also consider myself a genre writer and I absolutely love that. I love focusing the heart of the story on the characters, on making them human, but still playing around and having fun with it.
Yeah, and I think for me that's pretty much where I always want to start with a story is who is this person? What do they want? What do they need? What's their background? What's their biggest flaw? Why do we like them? And I think for me, like the emotion thesauruses have been great helps for fleshing out characters and really understanding their background. There's even a really great book called Story Genius that really has you like map out every single major memory a character has up until the book starts. And so I feel like understanding character is so important when writing genre fiction because people tend to get caught up in the world building, but the world building has to serve the character, not the other way around.
Absolutely. And hearing you talk, what do they want? What do they need? Yeah, I'm having flashbacks to the script writing classes I was in college.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
obviously you write scripts, but I'm curious, did you come to script writing first or prose writing first? How did you get involved with them both?
I actually started as a playwright. Um, I went to college in Chicago, which is a major playwriting city and theater city in general. And I was really fortunate to take classes with Mikkel Maher, who's like a really wonderful working playwright, and have the community at my college to kind of foster that craft. And I really just deeply fell in the playwriting hole after college ended. And then through playwriting, I was like, oh, well, if I can write a play, I could write a screenplay. Well, I guess if I can write a screenplay, I could write a short story. And it just goes to show you that, I guess, like the lines between mediums are so thin that what we think is one thing could very easily be another form. And I think people get really caught up in like, oh, this is a screenplay and you have to do XYZ in the screenplay because it's a screenplay. Then I'm like, well, how do you know it's a screenplay? Maybe it wants to be a book. Maybe it wants to be a poem. So like trying to understand and distill for my own sanity of like which of my ideas is the form that it wants to be is something that I'm like continually workshopping. But yeah, my bones are definitely with the theater, and I still write plays and I write musical theater. So I'm also constantly doing that.
That's so awesome. I love that so much. I had such a similar journey in my own kind of evolution as a writer. Um, I started out by writing my high school's drama club play.
Oh my,
Yes, that
very glee.
yes, very much. Um, then went to school for cinema, and
Hmm.
always swore I did not want to write prose because I thought it had to be literary and based on your life and boring. um,
Yeah,
yeah, that was always what I was told. And as a huge horror movie nerd, like I love 80s slashers. Um, I was like, I can write bad movies. That would be fantastic. That was like the
yeah,
goal. Um, did that for a while and eventually was like, maybe I'll write a story, like, maybe I'll write a
yeah.
book, and it really is so interesting. You can learn so much from going from medium to medium. Um
Absolutely. Well, and I think playwriting really teaches you about dialogue as action, and then screenwriting teaches you how to think visually and how to really have your narration be bare bones and moving the action forward. And then when you put those together, you get a short story, and you're like, oh, I have the narration and I have the dialogue. And then when you start studying poetry, then you're really down the rabbit hole because you're like, oh, I could say this in a more lyrical way. And I think for me, like being, because for me, like prose writing is actually very recent. I only started writing prose before I was applying to grad school, so less than 3 years ago at this point, or almost 3 years. And I really think you have to understand the building blocks of what a story is before you write prose, and there's no better way to learn that than through other forms and mediums.
Absolutely agree. So when you do have an idea, how do you go about the process of deciding what medium is? Do you come to like, I want to write a screenplay, let me think of it this way, or I want to write a story?
This is hilarious because I literally just made a TikTok the other day about this.
Great.
Um, yeah, so for me, when I'm thinking about what form is what medium, I'm kind of asking myself some rhetorical questions, which is funny because I teach rhetoric. So I'm like, what's the genre? What's the audience? What's the purpose? I'm thinking about the rhetoric triangle and like, is this emotional? And usually for me, if it's an idea that I can see very clearly in my mind's eye, either from like the characters, I'm like, oh, I know who these people are. I know exactly what they look like. I know what they're doing. I know what their goal is. Or I go, oh, this is a world and I'm creating a bigger world here. And I've had, mix-ups between forms before where, I thought a play was a play and then I rewrote it as a screenplay and it's a much better movie. And then I just had the same thing happen where I thought a play was a play, and now I'm like, no, it's a short story. So I have to go and like edit it now and make it a short story. And I think that really like for me with writing prose, it's about like, does the dialogue and narration work together? Does the world building work together within that? And I don't know, you just start writing. And if you, I feel like for me, whenever you get stumped and you're like, oh, I can't write any more of this, that's your brain telling you this isn't the right medium for this project and you need to pivot and switch. Um, so more on that in my TikTok if people want to watch that.
And what is your handle on TikTok?
It's at Makena Metz.
Perfect. Easy to find.
Yep.
So you mentioned that a few pieces of your work have to deal with mental illness, chronic illness, experiences of trauma. What leads you to those topics and to include those in your story?
So, I mean, as I said, I am a chronically ill, disabled writer. And I really feel like my work leans towards weirdos, misfits, and nerds. Those are kind of the three categories that all of my stories fall into. And I think there's something really powerful about writing about an experience that not many people have had, or writing about the intersection of experiences of even, oh, the intersection of disability and queerness, or the intersection of neurodivergence and abuse. And I feel like these intersections are so niche that they have not been written about. And I really feel like we need more and better representation of these kind of niche intersectional characters and experiences in mainstream fiction at large. And definitely the push is there to make it better, and lots of writers are doing this and putting out wonderful work. But for me, I really want to explore those very niche, intersectional, marginalized characters, because I think there's something there that needs to be said and that needs to be illuminated. And until there's parity, I'm not going to stop.
Absolutely. Honestly, it's so, so important.
Yeah. Well, and there's, I think, activism through writing is really important. And I'm not saying that every piece you write has to have a moral message, but I think every piece that you write should inspire some kind of call to action, whether or not that's emotional, literal, physical, whatever that is. I always want my readers to come away from my pieces feeling like they can be change makers.
I absolutely love that. I think it's so important. And even from the flip side, I was recently watching an interview. Forgive me, I don't remember with what author, but I was watching an interview and they said that the most interesting stories, the stories that have the most voice and the most heart to them, are usually the ones that challenge the status quo and that have that kind of social call to them.
Yes. Yeah, and I think challenging the status quo is a great phrase. And I think misfits generally do that in stories, and that's why I like to write about them so much.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I feel like that's a very central theme to a lot of genre fiction as well, genre in particular is.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, and I think genre fiction is always a metaphor for something bigger that we cannot necessarily understand or hear in our own world, but in a new world, that message becomes so illuminated and kind of holds a mirror up to our reality and goes, yeah, this isn't working, or we need to change this, or these things are issues that are happening in our society or in our culture. And that's why genre fiction is so important. And I will shake my finger at anyone who disagrees.
I will join you, stand right alongside
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and I mean this so sincerely that I think you're doing wonderful work, both on the writing
Thank
side of
you.
it and with this social push and social
Thank
tone.
you. And I mean, I really believe in like equitable access for education, and like my TikTok series I'm making right now is actually teaching people how to write a book. And I think, and I do a lot of research on disability and scholarship through my day job as a rad comp teacher, and about accessibility in the classroom. And I really think that we can create a more equitable kind of literary world through those calls to actions.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I also teach intro to writing at college, and
Oh, cool.
we do a whole lesson on why the way people are taught to write in college is not the most accessible way, what's keeping it inaccessible, um, and all of the politics that come behind that. And I think just
Yeah.
unpacking that and understanding that it's happening is so useful. And I get a lot of confused faces because it's mostly freshmen, and they're like, "Why are you talking
Hmm.
about this? Just tell me what the MLA format is." But it's so important too, and I think that we need to keep those conversations out there and constantly happening. It can't just fall away to the back burner because we need to know what MLA format is.
Yeah, well, and I think those conversations in like different literary spheres are really helpful for just creating a writing community too, and not like feeling so alone at your keyboard. And I really like having my little writing cohort through grad school, and like we all submit our work together, and we're all talking about the same things through classes, or just over texting or whatever, and we're sending each other memes all the time. And I think that every writer needs that kind of community.
The community is so central, so central. I completely agree. My grad school experience was something sort of similar. We ended up forming a writing group after graduation, and we've managed to keep it up for two years now, which is kind of wild.
It's
Um,
awesome.
it's been great, and it is so helpful. Just one of the hardest things I find about with entering the writing community and trying to be a writer. I mean, everyone who writes is a writer, but writing is kind of the hardest part, like keeping writing, staying up with it, and having those communities and writing groups is so helpful, so central to that.
Hmm. Well, and I mean, for me, I'm really deadline motivated. So if my friends are like, "This is due on Sunday," that will get me there.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Same, same.
Yeah, that NaNoWriMo tracking platform is just best.
Mm,
But I also use Scrivener, and Scrivener is great because I can like put the word count in, and it'll tell me if I hit it or not.
mhm, mhm. I love how many tools there are now too. It's not just like pen and paper. It's so many useful tools.
So many. I
Mhm.
have so much software. I have I probably work in too much software because I have Scrivener and Final Draft, and then I also work in Word, and I also work in Google Docs. I'm like, why can't there just be one?
Someone should invent that. Something that just handles it all. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Microsoft needs to get on that.
Yes. Shout out to Microsoft. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, fantastic, fantastic. What's next for you? Are you working on any particular projects? Have anything coming out soon?
Yes, I'm always working on projects. I really like to think about the writing practice as a stove. And this is a helpful metaphor for me because I have, on some burners, I have soup, on some I have chili, on some I have mashed potatoes. Some are boiling, some are simmering, some are cold, some are steaming. And that metaphor, I think, really helps me keep track of my projects because I work in so many different mediums. So compartmentalizing and going, okay, the burner is off, the lid is on the pot. It's just gonna like sit over here and get cold for a little bit, and I'll reheat it later. That really helps me when you're going back and forth between screenwriting and writing librettos for musical theater and writing songs and doing all of these different projects and working with different collaborators and stories. Um, so long story, long answer is yes, I am working on a few other things. Right now I'm writing a YA fantasy book. I started it last year in my fiction writing class, and my goal is to finish it this summer because I have a lit agent interested in it. So I'm really hoping I can get it, some interest, get some interest about it would be nice. And then if that falls through, I'll be querying it and trying to get a lit agent for this project. I'm working on a song cycle called Songs About Being Sick, which is about mental and physical illness, and it's musical theater. Um, I'm working on a short story right now that I just finished revising that I'm hoping to submit out pretty soon. Because I have like two lit mags in mind for it that I think would fit really well. And I'm also working on a mini chapbook for my poetry portfolio for my class. Because I finished grad school in 4 weeks. And so lots of stuff is coming out of that, which is great.
Really, congrats on grad school, congrats on all of the things. Sounds
Thank
like we have
you.
lots to expect and look forward to from you in the
I
future.
hope so. Yeah, I mean, I think a busy writer is a happy writer.
Absolutely. Um, so I think as like a little bonus question, I've been kind of
Yeah.
springing on everyone. If you could give one piece of advice to other writers out there, what would that be?
Hmm. Don't let people tell you that you can't do something if you want to do it. I think that people are always trying to put me in a box, and they're always trying to say, "Oh, you write plays, or you write screenplays, or oh, you write short stories." And their minds kind of gets boggled when I say, actually, I do lots of things and I do them all very well. And I think it's okay to own that. And it's okay to try new things and go, oh, you know what? I'm a short story writer, but I'm really interested in writing poetry. I'm going to take a poetry class. Or I'm a screenwriter and I'm really interested in writing for the theater and I'm going to take a playwriting class. So try new things and explore because you never know what will happen and what you'll create.
I absolutely love that advice. That's fantastic. Um, well, thank you. Thank you so much again for doing this. It's been really fun talking to
Yeah,
you.
for sure.
Um, lots of
Thank
lots of
you.
fantastic insight as well.
Thanks so much.